Intro, tell us what we got going
Yeah,
here.
absolutely. Thank you. So I'm Ryan Lipsey with Tycor Title and Haley Collier and Katie Methy and Shelby Connolly. And we are the group here happy to host this meeting with Henish, who is the ADU A to Z expert, the secondary dwelling unit ninja, and Sid, our appraiser. They're going to go over what adding an ADU to a listing or to a property, how it affects value, what the upside is, go over some case studies, and really get granular on an understanding of why ADUs are a good idea. So without any further ado, thank you guys for attending. Henish, take it away.
Cool. Thank you, Ryan. Appreciate you guys listening in this morning. This is a hot topic. It's been a hot topic for a few years since 2017 laws have changed. And the purpose of this presentation is just to give you enough information so you understand the process, what it looks like, overcome any kind of misnomers that you might have about these things being free or free permits or free plans, and just try to set the expectations right. So you have enough information for yourself or for your clients so that when they're ready to build one of these things, you know at least the basics to point people in the right direction and overcome any objections. Additionally, one of the things I like to give out as a disclaimer is that I'm not going to have any specific answers for general questions. So if you're asking me if you can build an ADU on your property in Hamul, the answer is probably yes, but I wouldn't know exactly where and how until I see address and do a little bit of research on that. With that being said, let's just get started. I'll kind of go into the presentation. Hopefully you guys can see my shared screen. If not, let me know. I think I've shared it. It looks like it's there. This is my company. You know, I've been in the business a long time, and for the last several years, I've been a flipper and started off as kind of a average, flipper. And then several years ago, I got my partner Blake in, and he's super diligent and was able to take our flips from just regular flips to like nice flips. And so now we call them investment remodels. And clients would come to us and say, hey, we're not looking to buy or sell, but we do want to get our house remodeled. Could you guys help us? We saw your house down the street. And so that rolled into, let's just open a full service construction company. There's a demand here for affordable, competitive, good customer service, people that call back, construction company. And so that's kind of where our opportunity set's been with the construction. This is some of my team. This doesn't include a lot of the workmen and the tradesmen that we have as well. Obviously we utilize subs as well, but our guys know what they're doing. I'm really honored to have them on my team and know the technical aspects of building properties. So what is an ADU? It's basically stands for accessory dwelling unit, and we're seeing all these kind of nicknames for them. So there's different categories, whether you have a kitchen, whether you have a kitchenette, whether you have a bathroom, if it's attached, detached, etc. These are other names for it. And we're seeing these kinds of versions of them, a lot of garage conversions, a lot of standalone units, especially if you have a house that's on an alley or separate side entrance, or you can walk behind your house fairly easily. And then, we even had a call a couple weeks ago for our first site visit for someone that had a basement because they had their house on a slope and they had a walkout basement. So these are kind of the generic types you'll see for a full separate rentable ADU. Restrictions, there are some things that are changing. The laws have been getting more friendly to people. So previously it was owner occupied only. Now you can do non-owner occupied. Previously you didn't have to do solar. As of now, you do have to put solar on your properties. And then now what we're finding also is that they've even removed it from HOA communities, preventing them from being built. So if previously you had an HOA community said you can't build one, now you can. And also what we've found is that people have said, no, I've looked into building an ADU a few years ago and we couldn't do it. Well, the odds are if you looked into it after 2017, the odds are you can do it. It's like 99% of homes now qualify for an ADU. Previous to the 2017 laws that have loosened up the requirements for parking, setbacks, easements, etc., only 5% of homes in California would have qualified for an ADU. So this is the opportunity set. It went from 5% to nearly 100% of homes that now qualify to build an ADU. So why should you consider building one? Obviously, the value is a big thing, and I'm going to have Sid talk about that when we get to it. The current climate, even with what's going on now with the coronavirus, we still have a massive housing shortage. It's a supply and demand issue. There's a lot of people moving here. There are a lot of people that live here. We see prices going up. We see rents going up. We're about 400,000 units short, and we're not nearly building as many housing units, whether they're attached multifamily or single family, anywhere, especially since in California, everyone wants to live closer to the coast as possible. So now this is an opportunity for you to turn your single family zone effectively into a 2-unit. And that's happened up and down the state. And we're seeing this happen in other cities and states as well, as trying to address the housing shortage that happens. And it's a great opportunity to get this moving. So they're putting in all of the incentives in place from the city perspective to try to get these built and address the housing shortage. Financial incentives, yes, there are several of them. Primarily the DIF fees have been reduced. The DIF is development impact fees. And depending on the size of the ADU, you can even reduce the fees even less. So less than 500 square foot ADUs have a smaller fee. Less than 800 square foot units have a small fee. As it gets bigger, the larger the fees. So it's kind of size related and then also city related. Certain cities have different fees than others. There's no one that has no fees. There's no one that has no fees. That's so get that out of your head that, oh, Encinitas has free plans and free permits. That's not necessarily the case. They're saving you portions of the multi-step, very complicated fee schedule. So the reasons why these things are getting built are varied. We're seeing about 50% that want to house their family, either if it's an older parent or an adult live-in child, or in the case of some people, they're moving into a 1 or 2 bedroom ADU that they've built, and then they're renting out their front house, which might be a 3 or 4 bedroom because they're an empty nester or something like that. So we're seeing all kinds of variety of this. Any way you cut it, it should be a pretty good value, because if you're building something for your family, ideally that costs less for them than if they had to go rent their own place. And if you want to keep them close, you can't get any closer than your backyard. I'm going to go into this a little bit further later in the presentation with some tax information, and also Sydney covers this as well in terms of how much equity you can potentially build right off the bat from building one of these. Okay, so that passes it over to Sydney. Sydney, so take it away. You just let me know when you want me to forward the slides.
Cool. Hey, good morning, everyone. I hope everyone is safe and healthy and doing well. I know this is troubling times, and times that we can take advantage of. So welcome. I'm going to talk about ADUs, of course. I'm going to keep it short and sweet. Everybody, Hanesh did a great job explaining what they are. So as an appraiser, there's 2 different ways how we value an ADU. One way is going to be the sales comparison approach. And you can go to the next slide. The sales comparison approach is what we do every day. It's your normal single family home comparing apples to apples. If you have a 2,000 square foot house, you're looking for other 2,000 square foot houses, whether you have a swimming pool, a view, whatever it is, that's going to be the sales comparison approach, is what you're most used to seeing. Anytime you're working with a multifamily style property, that's when the income approach will be the next way to value that property. And what the income approach does is it uses the rents. It uses the rents to determine value. So what we do is, you can go to the next slide, the second slide after this. What we do is we grab what we call the GRM, which is the gross rent multiplier. And you achieve this by taking a sales price divided by the rent. It's going to give you a GRM. Then you'll plug that GRM into any sort of rent situation, and it'll give you a value. So if you ever do, you guys ever selling or anyone buying like a multifamily duplex, triplex, quadruplex, this is what the lender is using to determine not only actual rent, but market rent. What is the potential of this property's worth by determining rents? So because an ADU is essentially a duplex, it's a single family with a secondary unit. The way that we're evaluating these on the income side is utilizing what a duplex will rent for is what an ADU will rent for. You have to be very clear. A single family home standalone by itself is going to rent vastly different than when you share a property with another home. And this is why we use the duplex model. Anytime, whether it's an attached duplex, a detached duplex, an attached ADU, a detached ADU, there's different appeals to that, and there's a different rentable market as well that's attached to that. So depending on how the lot area ratio is, whether you have a separate yard space for this ADU, or if you're buying a single family and you're looking at the lot area ratio, whether it's a detached garage or another space on the lot that you want to put this ADU on, when your clients are asking you these questions, you want to be able to identify not only the lot area ratio of that property, but where will the ADU be? Is it going to be the detached garage conversion where you can create another yard space and that's going to be the ADU, or somewhere else on the lot? So the income approach, and then if you go to the next couple slides there's one. I have a few examples of recent ADUs that I appraise. One being in East County, for those who that's your market. It's a case study that I did in Santee. So the loss of value, if they did not have an ADU, was nearly $300,000. And what we did on this property was the ADU is there in the back. It was already there. It was an existing ADU. This is a realtor that came to me, actually a developer that came to me because they didn't know how to market this property. And so I went in and I appraised the property, not only as a single family, what the single families are selling for in that market area, but also duplexes, and then extrapolated value from that. A question I always get is, what if there's not an ADU in my neighborhood? What if I live in a neighborhood, and what if I'm in University City and there isn't an ADU? How do you value that? In short, this is how we would, our methodology, our approach to evaluating something like that. I would find a competing market to your neighborhood, whatever neighborhood it is. If it's a single family home, what's a competing market to that neighborhood? If I'm appraising in University Heights, what are my competing markets? Well, it could be Mission Hills, could be it could be Normal Heights, could be Kensington. Those are my competing markets. So if I was in a University Heights and there were no ADUs, and I would look at Normal Heights, North Park, Mission Hills for those ADUs. Then once you find the ADU in that market, what you're going to do is you're going to look at predominant values between the neighborhoods. So everybody can do this. You can go on MLS, put in 92104, put in the parameters. We're looking at 2,000 square feet, overall square footage on ADU or single families. Let's just stick to single families. The same in another neighborhood. And then it'll give you highs and lows and then predominant, right? Or the median value. So you would take the median value in both those neighborhoods, whatever the difference was, then apply a percentage adjustment for location. So the methodology is you'd have to assume that in one competing neighborhood, if an ADU is treated in such a way, then in a similar neighborhood, it's going to be treated in that way as well. The second case study I did for those who are more coastal or North County is the one I did in Cardiff. You can move up for me. Thank you. And you can see at the bottom line, the loss of value without an ADU was $625,000. So in this neighborhood, it was roughly between $1.3 to $1.6 million for a 2,400 square foot home. What the ADU does, it adds a level of income that now has to be determined. These people here were Airbnb-ing their ADU. And this isn't the picture of the ADU. This was a badass photo. I was like, I just love the photo, so I threw it in there. So there goes honesty. But it was a Spanish style home, but I just love this. I gotta throw that in there. But they were Airbnb-ing the property, and because the vacation rental market is so volatile, if someone rents for 300 days or 250 days, those numbers are going to be skewed. So we use traditional rents, 12-month leases to find these rents. So this rent you see for the granny flat was $2,500. That's traditional rents. The lenders will not use vacation rentals anyway, or short-term rents. So we stick to the traditional 12-month rents. And then you can see the value, the appraised value was $2,067,000, but the appraised value on the income approach was 2.25. And the reason why that's higher is because we live in San Diego, so the rents are through the roof. So when we're extrapolating rents, they aren't all 12-month leases, but you'll see that rents are always going to be higher, or the income approach will always be higher in a good market like we're in than the sales comparison approach. But we provide both approaches to the lender, and depending on what you're going in on you're structuring your loan, they'll either take the income approach on that or the sales comparison approach as well. And then recently, I don't have a case study for this, but last week I did one in the college area. This is super important, and because Hanesh is going to get into the price per square foot on the bills, and maybe I can say this for later, Hanesh, or you want me to say it now? Or
No, I mean, like this case right here is a prime example. Say that we built 721, nice quality for Cardiff, and it costs $200,000, right? Just, assuming about almost $300 a foot to build something smaller, because the smaller a unit is, the higher the price per square foot to build, because you still have to put in the kitchen, you still have to put in a bathroom, you still have to put in HVAC systems, et cetera. But the return on investment just in terms of equity is nearly 3 to 1 in this case. Right?
Yeah.
If you're building for 200,000, but it's worth 600,000, that's a no-brainer, right? I know you're going to mention another case where it's still better, maybe not 3 to 1, but in almost every case that you've come across, true or false, there's at least a dollar for dollar return, if not better, to build one of these things.
Yeah, and you guys have to think about, when I say long-term investment, I would say it's 5 years would be great. I just did one recently last week. This was in the college area, so it's in the Metro San Diego. And in the college area, you rent per head, per student. So this one was 1,000 square feet was the ADU. The market value for a single family home in that area was between 520,000 to 570. And this property was 1,100 square feet. It was okay. It was an average condition. So that I would say that value would probably be closer to 520 to 530. But the value that we appraised that ADU, so that the single family is 1,100 square feet, they somehow got it approved, permitted by the city to build an ADU at 1,000 square feet because they had a very large lot. But the value that we came in on was 930,000 for the ADU. So single family alone was, let's say, 530. With the ADU was 930. They gained $400,000 in value for 1,000 square foot ADU. Even at, let's say, on the high end at $300 a square foot, you're still coming in with mass equity. So Hanesh, I'll let you take away and answer any questions later. Thank you guys.
Yeah, cool. Appreciate that. I mean, I wanted to get Sydney on this one because in prior iterations of these webinars I've done, people had always asked that question. But at the end of the day, the fact is that very few people build these to flip the property immediately. Me as a flipper, I would never build an ADU on a property because it still takes 9 to 12 months to build, and using hard money or credit line, the equity just gets eaten up by that. So it's not worth it, but it's ideally for a client that lives in their house or owns investment properties and is planning to keep it for 3 or 5 years or longer, because they are getting instant equity. The key thing with that is that ideally you'd be able to go to Rodrigo or someone else and refi out, right? If you used cash, or if you got some other financing from someplace, or a construction loan that might be slightly higher in rate and you want to refi out, you probably have the equity to do so, and get yourself a new lower rate mortgage. So I'll let Rodrigo get into that in a couple of slides when we get to that. I think we're almost there. So the process, so what's this take to get one of these things built? So ideally, first off, client calls us and says, hey, I've got a house. This is where I live. This is what I'd like to build. Great. Now we can kind of look online, and here's a resource that you guys should write down. It's called ScoutRed, SCOUTRED.com. And it's free for a lot of information. And then for an extra $9 per property, you can get even more information. I would be shocked if any of you put in your own properties and didn't learn something about your house and your property in terms of zoning, setbacks, easements, dwelling units per acre that you could build, et cetera, et cetera. Any kind of overlays that you might have, whether it's a coastal overlay or transit overlay. There's a lot of good information there. And we use that website often to figure out roughly whether you can build something on your property. Most times we're not charging for site studies, especially if you or us have qualified the client and they understand that, yes, it costs more than $20,000 to build an ADU. As long as they understand the realities of what it takes to build an ADU, the timeline, they have proper expectations. We're not charging this. This is, I kind of put this out there just to kind of stop the tire kickers, just saying, come on over to our house. And I just sometimes don't have 2 or 3 hours to spend before we vet someone out. So if someone's vetted out and they understand the process, then great, we'll come and check it out. I'm doing that this afternoon for a property. A guy wants a 1,200 square foot ADU in front of his house. And we've understood the numbers. It was referred by a mortgage broker that said they're qualified for the financing. In that case, obviously we're going to go out there and meet with them because he's ready to get started. Drafting and permits, and this can vary depending on the size, depending on if it's a conversion, depending on if it's attached or not, and what city you're in. So permits and planning can cost anywhere from $10,000 to $30,000 total. And that's just the soft costs before we can even get a permit to start construction. So that takes about 3 to 4 months. And what people forget is that if you haven't gone through a construction process with the city, you have to send in plans of your property as built, and then also plans of your property after the ADU is built. So when you're saying, oh, Encinitas is giving out free plans, great, but they don't know what your existing lot and your house looks like, right? So you have to get all that drawn up and measured by an architect, by a draftsman that spends a couple hours at your house with a tape measure and measures it out and says, here's your easements, here's the structure that's there, here's the driveway, et cetera, so the city can review those plans as built and as proposed with the ADU so they can get it done. It's really worthwhile spending the little bit extra to get a professional that's done this before, because what we found is that when people try to find a cheapo draftsman that they found on Fiverr or Craigslist, they end up taking a year or more because they've had to go back and forth with the city with so many cycle issues because that person may not know the code exactly and how to build these ADUs. So now you're losing that opportunity cost of wasting all that time versus the architects that we typically work with and the draftsmen that we typically work with. They can get these punched through the first time they send it in because they've done enough and they know what they're doing and they know what the city's looking for. So keep that in mind. It's always more expensive to hire an amateur at stuff like this. You know, if you're looking for someone to caulk your sink, yeah, call the handyman. But if you need something built, you got to call a professional. So I have blogs and information on this. If you guys ever go to my website at calhomeco.com, you can see a blog on how to choose a contractor. So whether it's us or not, doesn't matter. I would just say really spend some time vetting out who you're going to be working with, because it's almost like having a relationship with this person for the next 4 to 6 months that you're building the property. And if you can't communicate with them, and if you don't trust them, and you don't think they're going to change order you to death, then you're going to have a bad experience. And that's got to cost money, right? That, you know, having a bad experience is expensive. So figure anywhere from $200 on the low side for a basic larger ADU per square foot, and $350 or more for a more complicated, higher design, higher quality finishes, smaller ADU. So the smaller it is, the more expensive price per square foot, based on just economy of scale, right? Like I mentioned, you still have to put in a kitchen, and kitchens are expensive. You still have to put in bathrooms and plumbing, and bathrooms and tile are expensive. So I'll show you some pictures because people some seem to want to underestimate the complexity of building something. So this is just a quick screenshot of a section of plans of an ADU conversion that we're doing up in Claremont. And this is just showing some of the schematics on this in terms of where the plumbing fixtures are located, what the ceiling height is, where the windows are. And you can see these are all details that are important for us to estimate what it costs to build this thing. So when we were working with the draftsman, in this case, the client came to us at the beginning and said, okay, let's get the plans together. And then we knew his budget, and we said, okay, we'll design this place to fit your budget and get any nice to haves and want to haves on there. And then based on the plans, we can bid it and tweak the plans as necessary to make sure it falls in the client's budget. We've had this happen before where we had a client that wanted to do a big addition on their property in Point Loma. They wanted a top end architect, which we got them, that gets them in magazines and stuff. And they had a $350 budget. The architect came back with plans that would have cost at least $500,000 to build. And so it was nice because we were working with them and said, hey, we got to tone back some of these nice to have features if you want to keep it at $350. And so it's always important for us to work hand in hand with architect to make sure that we can meet the client's budget, because we don't want to upset anyone and have it stop because they're $100,000 short in what it would cost to build what they want. So this is that same ADU. You can see is kind of framing in the garage door. Little space for a window, little space for a front door. This is the framing inside. The guy wanted vaulted ceilings, so we had to beef up the exterior walls. So you can see that all these extra supports have to be put in. You can't just put a kitchen or a bathroom or a toilet in a garage and say it's an ADU. If you want it done right, you want it to rent for top dollar, if you want it to have value when you eventually sell it, you have to build it right. This is some of the more of the framing that you can see. You can see the rough electrical starting to come in with the wires for all the electrical throughout. And you know, this prior picture, you can see in that bottom left corner, that's where the bathroom is, but the concrete's all there. Here's the next picture with the concrete cut out and the sewer lines put in for the bathroom, right? You got the shower, you got the toilet, you got the sink, and you have another one for the washer and dryer stack unit that's going to be going in there. So with all of those, you also have plumbing stacks, vent stacks going up through the roof as well. So when people think that these should be cheap, like you can see that this isn't cheap work to do if you want it done properly. That one's almost done. When we get that out, I'll share that with like pictures and before and afters and the final product. So it should be done in about a week. Right here in Claremont. So design is also useful. I have a small ADU behind my property, and people always come to it and they always tell me, I can't believe this is only 875 square feet. It seems so much bigger. Well, that's because I used a proper architect. It's because I used a proper designer to make the space flow and feel better and bigger than it is. So having a good designer help you with that can make the difference between just having a plain Jane ADU versus something that's nice that someone might pay top dollar for, or looks great for your family to use, and is functional and will last a long time and gets the best use out of it. So really worth it. It'll save an end client several hours per room trying to pick out hardware and cabinets and colors and tile and fixtures, and all that can be overwhelming because of the world we live in. There's thousands of choices for each, but you work with the designer. They're able to take your budget, take your design, take your Pinterest pics and say, okay, this is what we can build to fit your budget. And these are cost affordable, long lasting materials. So overall costs, permits and drafting, 10 to 30,000, construction anywhere from 200 to 350 a foot, design, which is optional, but I'd recommend it, is about $3 a foot. And that takes anywhere from 9 to 12 months. So Rodrigo, you on deck? There he is. Okay, unmute yourself. And so cost breakdown. You saw the numbers in terms of what it would cost to build these, but there's ways to pay for them too, right? You don't have to just have a fat bank account. Rodrigo, tell us what we can do to get some money on these things.
Absolutely. So owning the property, assuming we have the equity already in play, right? You can do one of two things. Number one, you can do one loan, cash out refinance, up to 80% of the appraised value minus what you owe. You get that to take out. Or two, to really maximize these, and a lot of people have been doing it, is doing a home equity line of credit, right? So that you figure out what's a better situation for the client if it's one loan, if they have enough equity. But if they don't, they'll do a line of credit. Line of credit's anywhere from, let's say, 3.5% to 5% based on their credit score and based on where prime lies. And then they have an interest-only payment on the construction, right? Get it. And then they finance for the build. What's good about the line of credit is that as the rental income comes in, you can slowly chip away at that line of credit and essentially pay it off and then continue cash flowing. So again, one of two ways. One, you do a cash out refinance with just one loan, and assuming there's enough equity in the property, you can just take cash out one loan, you lower your rate, and all the money's fixed at a lower rate for 30 years. Or two, if you don't have enough equity, you can maximize a cash out up to 89% of the appraised value and pull that money out and make interest-only payments on that money that you take out so that you can build.
Awesome. Thank you. So, one other way that I like to mention that sometimes people forget about is the bank of family. You might have family or good friends that have money sitting in the bank making 1% a month. You might say, hey, I'll get you a lien on my property. Give me a couple $100,000. I'm going to pay you 3, 4, 5, 6%. It's just an option that I've pitched. And some people are like, that was awesome. I told my parents and they gave me the money and now they have a lien on the property and my parents are the bank. Rodrigo, what do you think of that option?
I think that's genius. Who doesn't want to collect 4 or 5% right now when the banks only pay you max 1.7, 1.8%, right? I think it's a phenomenal. And what better tool than to collateralize a debt by a real estate property? I mean, talk about a guarantee. So I think that's genius idea.
Yeah, people forget about that all the time. And then I mentioned that, like, oh, I don't want to take money from my family. I'm like, you're not. You're the lender or you're the borrower and they're the lender. They're the bank. Let them be the bank. And then if you can refi them out after you built this thing, perfect. Everyone's happy. They got their return on investment and you got your property.
Absolutely. That's a phenomenal idea.
So I'm going to go into a little bit more of this as well in terms of the numbers that, it's kind of redundant because I know Sydney covered it a little bit. I like this quote from Red Adair. It's super applicable. I can't tell you how many times people have called us after they picked the contractor that was $10,000 or $20,000 and less on their initial bid. Then they came back to us, or we'd start hearing horror stories that they didn't pay their subs and now they're asking for change orders and now they don't trust the guy anymore. Can we take over the project? And 99% of the time we cannot take over the project. It's just, we don't know how poorly or not well they did the preliminary steps. We can't take that over and finish the product and put our name on it. So We hear this way too often. Sorry, I picked someone cheaper and now we're kicking ourselves. So vet out who you're working with properly to make sure they can execute and get this thing done with the expectations that you've got set. Okay, tax strategy. So big disclaimer, I'm not a tax professional. I'm not an accountant. I'm not an enrolled agent. I don't know the tax code specifically, but what I have done is spent way too much time with CPAs and enrolled agents and other financial professionals to vet this information out, and it does check out. But with that said, I would confer with your own. And if you don't know the right people, let me know. I'll refer you to a couple that can go over some of the tax stuff. So in this example that I'm going to give, the idea behind this is that sometimes people look at this linearly and say, okay, an ADU is $200,000. I don't have $200,000. I can't afford it. The goal is that once I go over this, the conversation switches from, I don't know if I can afford it to, I can't afford not to build one of these things. So I'm doing this right now with my ADU because I bought the house last year and got the ADU on it. And so I'm breaking it out like this. And coincidentally, my property size is similar. It's almost 2,100 square foot and 876 for the ADU. In this case, we're looking at $800,000 property. The primary is worth 600. The ADU is worth about 200. And this is breaking it down based on the square footage. So square footage shows about in terms of net terms. So 2060 is the rent on this thing. So let's take a look at this. So first off, standard real estate Schedule E, you write off your expenses. You've got mortgage interest, you've got taxes, you've got utilities and maintenance. That's $4,400 total for the property. And Haley, I can send out the presentation in whole. I'll share this out so you don't have to take cell phone pictures of everything. So you can have that. And then the ADU is about 30% of the total building. So you take 30% of the total expenses, and that's how much you can write off monthly, right? $1,300 a month, $15,600 a year that you're writing off as straight expenses. Now, this is awesome because I checked with all my friends that own commercial real estate or multiple rental properties. Like, yeah, this is how we do it. You know, we cost segregate. We reclassify the asset as a mixed use property. So you kind of reclassify your ADU as a separate rental, which it basically is. And then you can cost segregate because a lot of people do linear depreciation of just structure at 27.5 years. But what they forget is that you can do land improvements over a 15-year depreciation. You can do fixtures over a 7-year depreciation and furniture in a 5-year, right? Now you're writing off $1,675 a month in depreciation in this case example. So when we look back at the bottom chart right there, you got $2,060 in rent, $1,300 in operating expenses, $1,675 in depreciation. You're actually losing $920 a month per the tax code, which is $11,000 a year that you can use to write down your ordinary income, right? So now when you're looking at $11,000 less, if you're at a 30% tax bracket, say 25% federal and 5 state, you know, that's almost $3,000, $3,300 in tax savings. So you've got an annual income of $2,060 a month is $24,700 a year. Your loss after operating expenses and depreciation is $11,000, plus you're getting cash back in your tax savings of $3,300. Your income plus your savings is now $28,000. And on your $200,000 structure, that's a 14% cap rate. I like Don's reaction. I like that he's nodding and eyebrowing. Thank you for that. So the cash flow, net cash flow of the rent that you're getting is nearly 37%. I honestly don't know any better investment. If you do, please let me know because I need to switch industries then because this is so compelling. And I'm doing this with my own property and it's checking it out. It's checking out really nicely where I'm showing that I'm losing like $20,000 this year, which is sweet. I like when you own investment properties, if you can show you're losing money, it's a win-win because I'm actually getting rent. I'm just writing down the depreciation. This is a huge strategy. If you don't know this, please spend some time with your enrolled agent or your CPA to explain this because you should be doing this with your own properties and making sure your clients are doing the same. I'd bet a lot of them aren't that may not have or have been using the same accountant for 10, 15, 20 years and didn't think to add this in when they started getting rental properties. That's basically it. That's my whole presentation. I should have like a thank you slide at the end. I'll make that change in the future, but I appreciate you guys listening in. Ryan's got some jazz hands going.
Hey, so if I have like a single family that I'm using currently as an Airbnb, what's the potential, increase I can do by adding an ADU? I know you just went through a lot of the numbers, but take a scenario like that. So, and I like that I don't have to understand everything. I can just send them to you. And how do we get a hold of you and give us some of that info as well?
Yeah, I put that in the chat. I put my contact information. Ideally, anyone that's registered for this webinar, you probably have the invite list and we can send out my information. You can also send out this whole webinar as well. Obviously, Sydney's and Rodrigo's as well. Please send out their information. Yeah, I mean, the best way would be to send me an email and saying, hey, I have this property. Here's the address. This is what I'd like to build. Is this possible?
That's awesome. We appreciate you guys making yourself available for this. And I will be distributing to all the attendees as well as other clients who couldn't make it on the call but asked for the recording. So really, really a lot of value you're bringing to the industry, man. I know I've referred a bunch of people your way with rave reviews. Really well done, gentlemen. Any final thoughts? Dave, give us some final thoughts, buddy. Give us some positivity.
Yeah, if you guys have any questions, even like, hey, this is a property that we're looking at or my buyers are looking at. What do you think potential would be if, they want to put an ADU on it? Hey, what do you think rents would maximum? I mean, look, we all use the MLS. I just look at it a little bit differently as an appraiser, but I can definitely help you out with that. I'm here to be a resource. So it doesn't have to be something I'm actually going out to appraise. But if someone is serious about, this direction, then give me a call. I'd love to assist you in any way that I can.
Right on. Okay, well, everybody, happy Friday. Enjoy the weekend. I know every day kind of feels the same, like Groundhog's Day, but appreciate you so much. Yes, we are champions. Good job, Henish. Great work. Way to be of value to the people. And any final questions? I'm going to stick around, so please ask any questions you have, but look forward to speaking with all of you.
Yeah, if anyone, I think we keep this open for a little bit. If anyone wants to drop off, great. If anyone has questions, great. I also just sent on the chat a link to the Prezi that I used. Someone check that and make sure it works. It should work just fine.
Okay.
Further up, you've got my contact information. And any questions? Yeah, I mean, Sydney, I guess, the bottom line that I would say is that between the increase in equity, between the value that you can have for your family or as a rental, or especially with the depreciation and operating expenses you could write down, it should really, really be a win-win for anyone that's looking into doing this as an investment or as a personal use. There's really no better strategy right now in Southern California or even in California to increase your housing, increase your wealth, increase the ability to keep your family together, because of your return on investment is through the roof on these things.
Well, man, you can really take advantage of the taxes as well. The depreciation, it's huge. It's like, it really does shift from why should I do this to why shouldn't I, or why wouldn't I, or how can I afford not to, right?
Right.
Really appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, who doesn't want an extra $1,000 in their pocket every month? I mean, and that's big, and people don't understand that. And so, don't buy real estate in Arizona if you could put one in your own backyard.
I wonder, how does it relate to like the offsets? Can you go right up to the property line? Does it vary by what part of the county you're in?
Correct. I mean, they've made laws now where literally you can build up to 30 linear feet on the property line.
Wow, that's helpful, I would imagine, by positioning these things.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that way you don't have to have a 4 to 6 foot easement around your property or setbacks or anything like that. Especially if you already have existing structures, that makes it even easier. Like if you've already got, like we're doing one in PB where the lady's got a garage from like 1940 and it's like on the corner of her property on the property line. And the city's letting us rebuild that structure to keep it right there on her property line. We don't have to like move it and create an easement or a sidewalk around it, nothing, like right on her property line.
Are you comfortable with customers sending you like an APN and saying, Henish, what can I do with this? Or do you have like a maximum potential of a given property? Do you know where to look that up, or do you advise?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Scout Red is a really good resource for that. And what we've come to find out recently is that now there's laws being put in place already where even if you're maxed out on your FAR, and FAR stands for Florida Area Ratio. So let me give you an example. Say you live on a 6,000 square foot lot and you're in an RS1 zone where your FAR is 0.5. What that means is that your Florida area ratio is 0.5. The maximum you could build is 3,000 square feet on that property. Make sense? So that's what FAR, how people work that out. Now with ADUs, they've made an exemption. You can now build 800 square feet over your FAR. You can now put 3,800 square foot on your 4,000 square foot lot, or your 8,000 square foot lot, when previously only 3,000 square feet were allowed.
Wow.
That's a huge benefit. So, I've had developers hit me up, guys that like build big houses on lots in PB, and they're like, hey, can I put it 800, could I put an ADU on this? I'm like, yeah, up to 800 square feet, even because they've already maxed out the lot size with their 3,000 square foot houses on their 6,000 square foot lots in PB.
That's helpful.
So you know, it's like what the gist of it is that almost every time, if you're like, can I build an ADU? The answer is almost always yes.
Nice. Right on, man. Well, I carry on, gentlemen. I thank you everyone again for attending. That's all we have. I will send this out. Really appreciate you and chat with you guys soon. All righty.
Stay healthy and safe.
All right.
Yes.
Stay
Bye.
healthy. Stay safe. Okay. Bye-bye.